Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, October the 10th, 2025, and today we will talk about what to do when hay is the only mulch option you got, the Dogma free garden, and it is Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, happy Friday, everyone. I hope you all are doing well, and the week has been a smash hit for you. Ours has been a little random, I think, with the kids out of school for fall break and the composting conference this week and an over 4-inch rainfall event on Tuesday, which was record-breaking, I think, for this time of year. I will not be at the conference today, or at least I don't think I will. I may try, but we'll see. But I had a blast yesterday at the Kentucky Composting Conference. Most of what I took away, I'm going to save for a little bit of stuff next week to talk about. So, something to look forward to. But on Wednesday, we went to the Bernheim Forest, south of Louisville here, and that was just really excellent. They have these amazing wooden forest giant sculptures that are really well done. A little bit hard to explain if you're just listening on the podcast, but they're really cool. So we walked around there for a while and just hung out with the kids and the giants, and enjoyed our first real burst of hoodie weather. I loved how much of that place was dedicated to different species of trees and flowers and grasses. There were wild persimmons on the ground and passion fruits in the prairie. I'll bet it is a wild cacophonic, is that even a word? Cacophonic array of birds in the spring. Definitely going to have to hit that place up again at some point. So I guess just another PSA to go explore the amazing outdoor places that are maintained around your state and region, because there's some true gems out there. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about lemongrass, and we started our soil health series as well that day. A few people commented about their overwintering lemongrass strategies. At MK Farm Garden wrote, quote, North Texas, lemongrass grower here. We have the greenhouse sidewalls lined with lemongrass at all times and thin and split them up every spring and transplant outside once it warms up. Every once in a while, we will dig up and move some back inside the greenhouse when needed and have the room, end quote. Also, at Silver Saab Arc, not sure if I said that right, wrote, quote, Southern Michigan. My basement stays between 47 degrees and 56 degrees Fahrenheit during the winter. Lemongrass is a lot easier than overwintering chili peppers. Mine usually stays pretty dormant overwintered in food grade 3.5 gallon buckets. They get about 6 hours of grow light. My chilies get direct placement. The lemongrass gets placed in the indirect light saturation. It gets planted in raised beds in June, end quote. And also for another one, at Kent Suji Farm wrote, quote, I just bring my lemongrass in for the winter, put it with my houseplants, and then transition it out next late spring. It is awesome, and my second season with it, end quote. So there you go, some additional experience there, and I may try a bit of that myself this year just to see how it goes. I would love to have earlier and thicker lemongrass, so I'm down with that. On Tuesday, we continued on with our soil health principles, and that got a lot of good feedback. In fact, that's a topic I'm going to be tackling more at the Carolina Farm Stewardship Conference next month. So if you're in South Carolina area, I'll see you over there. I'll have Mike put the link in the show notes for that. That day, we also talked about pathway management, though, with wood chips. At No Vampires 223 wrote, quote, I live in Southern Oregon and have access to a free sawdust, which I have always used in my chicken house. I found wood chips could bring in invasive plants from just the cut tree limb falling into a patch of weeds along the highway, and then I had those weeds invade my organic property. What do you see as a difference, if any, between sawdust and wood chips, besides the no greenery in the mix and being smaller chunks, of course? Thanks, Jesse, end quote. Okay, thanks, and bummer about the invasives there. That's a bummer. And yeah, anytime you are bringing in any sort of outside material like wood chips, hay, straw, etc., it's hard to know for sure what's in it. Wood chips don't usually have invasives in our area, but it's certainly possible. Now, for the sawdust versus wood chip question, the biggest difference between them is surface area. Wood chips are larger, so less surface area. Remember, smaller things have more surface area. That means sawdust can more readily lock up nitrogen, though, if worked into the soil. The other factor is that sawdust can be what we call hydrophobic, meaning that it does not allow water to penetrate very easily, like underneath of it. So in drier regions, it may be a challenge to have water penetrate that sawdust if it's laid down, like for instance in your pathways, or it may wash out in more heavy rainfalls more easily than perhaps wood chips. I like sawdust for covering heavy loads of nitrogen like manure for compost to help keep the smell down. Directly in the garden is a little trickier though, and you definitely don't want either of those things in your lettuce mixes. I mean, sawdust is not necessarily better than wood chips, at least palatability wise. Also that day at Matt Mudd 3528 wrote, quote, I tried leaving grass/clover between the rows and got a mower that mulches, spread the mulch thin, and had a great year. No such thing as a hassle-free garden, but mowing and mulching was much easier than keeping bare, end quote. Thanks. And for sure, there is no easy option. They all take some amount of work and some amount of upkeep. I personally did kind of agree that I found that the living pathways are probably the least amount of work and maybe the greatest reward, but also the greatest risk. They are, without a question, to me, the riskiest just because of the weed seed element. So it's a trade-off. It's always a trade-off. Lots of trading and farming. On Wednesday, we had Ian McSweeney and Julian Lauzana on to talk about Farmland Commons and how it worked. I loved the comments from that day because the contrast of heck yeah and no thanks may have set a record on this channel. At Mr. That Guy 333 wrote, quote, you got me with that thumbnail, worker cooperative farms and farming land trusts/commons. Absolutely awesome, end quote. Then you have those like at Nick's Knapsack, that's like a tongue twister, who I thought, though thoughtfully, wrote, quote, having been a part of this type of community before, I would say do tread with caution. There are definitely lots of pluses to a lease structure that takes some of the overhead worry of a mortgage or loan out of the farm equation, but with that comes new problems when it comes to how the community is integrated, end quote. Yeah, I think, the Farmland Commons is a really cool option, especially for keeping farms farmed. But like with absolutely anything, success also really depends on who is involved and how well they communicate. I love ideas like this, though, and that sort of bend and challenge our sense of what a farm could be or how land could be managed or could be owned. Shouts to Ian and Julian for joining me, and also to you all for all your thoughtful critiques. Then on Thursday, we talked about bindweed and fig interplanting. At Forager's Garden offered an anecdote about bindweed, quote, growing crops like garlic and potatoes has helped my bindweed issues, using the opportunity to weed out the root as I am bed prepping and harvesting crops that already are disturbing the soil a good bit. It's taken a little while constantly knocking it back and shading it out with other crops, but as I am in year 3 now, I do not experience the bindweed nearly like I used to, end quote. Thanks. And obviously that may depend a little bit on where you are and how effective that will be. But depending on the weed and the situation, I often tell growers to attack those weed areas, like where the perennial weeds are the worst, with more intensive crops, because you will be cultivating and harvesting them pretty fast. And then you will flip those beds multiple times, giving you ample opportunity to pull the rhizomes as you're going from one crop to the other, or as you're cleaning up a bed. Of course, in those situations, you have to allow for more time to actually do the weeding or the bed flip, or you lose both the crop and cede more territory to the weed, which is not the goal. But with a good cultivation habit and plan, you really can knock them back that way. Anyway, good stuff as always this week, y'all. Truly, thank you for the excellent input. I'm super thankful for the insight and the questions that you all bring to this channel. Oh, don't forget, keep sending in those 20-second farm video clips to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. I'd like to see some of your winter gardens getting loaded up, or some springs gardens down there in the southern hemisphere. I know you all are busy, hard at it. So shoot those over to Farmer Mike. Okay, break time, and then we will talk Hey. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Is this work worth $2 or $5 for you every week? You can chip in. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Austin at Vital Root Farm, who writes, quote, hey, Jesse, but H-A-Y, hey. Anyway, my area in Zone 3A has abundant and cheap clean hay. My area also has little to no compost, clean straw, or other practical mulches. Because of what you've said here and there about hay being a great way to introduce a lot of weed seeds to a garden, I'm avoiding using it. Is there any way to use hay in the garden that won't restock my soil with tons of weed seeds? Or is it just a cost/benefit situation? Thanks so much, end quote. All right, so great question. Thank you. Now, those of you who have followed me for a long time know that I have a lot of love for hay, but I also definitely, as Austin noted, am cautious about it because of the weed seed issue. The thing with hay is that although the goal is generally fresh grass that has not set seed when you're cutting hay, when the hay is harvested, there is almost always something going to seed, like some grass or some forb or so whatever. So grass is cut first in, let's say, June here. At that time, there are things like winter grasses going to seed, as well as maybe some summer grasses from last year that the birds and other animals just never really fully picked clean over the winter. So those seeds make their way into the bales of hay, and then they can make their way into your gardens. Of course, like I sort of said, hay is also harvested at the grasses, like at their near peak in terms of nutrition and specifically protein, because hay's main purpose is to sustain and supplement livestock over the winter. So it's got to have some amount of nutrition. Straw can't do that because it doesn't really have any nutrition left. All the nutrition went into the grain before that was harvested. With grass hay, however, the nutrition of the hay is the goal, right? Like you want to cut it green, and therefore it can be a great additive to gardens. If it can feed livestock over the winter, it can feed the soil. That green turns to nitrogen and other nutrients for plants, along with, of course, all the other benefits of mulch, holding water, holding the soil in place, looking cool, style and substance. However, the seeds are the trade-off here. So using hay has to be done not just with caution, but with a several year-long plan for that garden spot. For us, what that looked like is, and I've talked about this in bits and pieces, throughout this show and also on this channel, just in general, is that we split up our gardens between fast-growing crops that we managed with the compost mulch, so carrots, lettuces, radishes, that sort of stuff that was either transplanted or just like a lot of direct seeding that had to be done really quickly. Then we had a handful of plots that were always managed with either hay or hay plus cover crops. Always being the operative word there. I could not put hay down one year and then expect to be able to directly seed that bed the next year. The weed seeds would just be, too much. So the crops we grew in those areas were things like potatoes, sweet potatoes, onions, garlic, field tomatoes, popcorn, and so on. Basically, the long season bigger crops were the only crops that got that hay treatment. Now, for crops like corn and sweet potatoes that did not really grow in mulch, I like to run the chickens, through those plots before planting them, because they would, help with the weed seed factor a bit by eating them. And then also, they would add a little bit of nitrogen, and then I would also just like generally tarp over top of that area for a little while too, to kill any weed seeds that were missed, or of course planted by the chickens, which they also like to do. Sometimes you just have to get creative to use the materials you have around you, and hay is, a pretty good example of that. I've even just simply composted bulk hay that I had access to because in all honesty, it was the best carbonaceous material I could get my hands on for the price at the time for compost. So I mixed it with some horse and chicken manure and a lot of water and made some really nice mulching compost that way. Anyway, I do love hay. It's abundant here as well, but I also think it's among the more difficult mulches to use, and you should proceed with caution because it can contain not just things like grass, but things like Johnson grass that can be difficult to get rid of once established. And of course, since you're in such a cold climate, you also have to think about when you're using it and how, because it will cool your soil. I promise a whole series on each mulch before too long, because talking about each mulching option more in depth would be super helpful. And there are several studies I've not really talked about yet on mulch here, so that's fun. Always something new to explore. More on that later. Great questions, and folks, always feel free to add your insight. Otherwise, it's one last break, and then when we come back, we will kill us some Dogma. Be right back.
So this is ants just taking up residence inside of a Napa cabbage. That's fun.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, so at the start of this week, I talked about the principles of soil health, keeping the soil covered as much as possible, planted as much as possible, and disturbing it as little as you possibly can in your context. There is, of course, a hidden principle within all of those three principles, which is to say, grow without dogma, represented with as possible. When we first started no-till growers, people would often say things like, If you are planting a crop in the ground, it's tillage. Or if you're broad forking the soil, it's harming some soil life. So that can't possibly be no-till. But one thing we have long maintained is no-tillage is not the starting point, or at least not always. No-till is the ultimate goal, right? No-till is a philosophy of doing less, of causing less harm, of actively improving the soil. And sometimes along the way, it's going to require some soil work, and it definitely requires putting plants in the ground. However, no two farms can and will go about this the exact same way. Farming and gardening is a relationship business. In the same way, one partner cannot just hoist upon another partner what they want without first asking what the other person wants from the relationship. The grower must listen to what their soil needs and not just bring their own unshakable idealisms to the soil. Moreover, what my soil needs here in Kentucky Zone 6B is going to be different from what a sandy soil needs. A tropical soil, a prairie soil, and so on. So too will my tool access be different, and the crops that I want to grow will be unique to my market. The materials I have that I can cover my soil with will not only be specific to my region by and large, but at a different cost, in different quantities with different levels of quality. All of that is simply to emphasize that we cover the soil, plant the soil, and we're gentle with our disturbance as much as possible, because success with growing food is not going to come from one's own view of what is a perfect farm, but rather one's ability to build a relationship with that farm. So do these things as much as possible as you can in your context, and don't compare what you are doing or how little or much you're doing to others, or think of any requisite disturbance as a failure if it's moving you closer to a healthier farm. It's not about being a tillage farm or a no tillage farm. It's about being a steward. Being dogmatic about what a farm should be is not stewardship, it's performance. So indeed, don't bring your own strict ideas to the farm. Make it more collaborative. Let the farm create the ideas with you. And I think we will let you all say the rest in the comments. Otherwise, that's a wrap Friday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and/or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to the Cosmic Pupper. Oh, that's fun. Norsk Guard Farm, welcome back. Chris Couch and Derek and Patrick Weaver. All right, so keeping the story going, and I feel like I have a monumental task of wrapping this one up since we didn't have any signups yesterday. So let's see how we do here. First, as you will remember, our heroine, Marianne, was joined by another water hater on the boat the next day after she arrived there mysteriously. Then, a couple days later, there was another person, same story. Then another person, afraid of water, same story. They would paddle around, which they were becoming quite good at, notably. Eventually, they would, do it for so long that they all wore out and they would fall asleep, and someone would, suddenly appear on the boat the next day. Try as they might to circumvent this sort of system, they could not. Eventually, they'd put somebody on third watch, but eventually that person would fall asleep, and then they would all wake up and there'd be a new person there. And then one day, they, decided to just head east until they hit land. Let's just go in one direction until we run into land. And everyone grabbed their oar and started rowing. They would stop and rest and fish for food, although there were also plenty of rations on the boat, notably, they weren't starving. And then they would start rowing again. Then, one day, seagulls appeared overhead, followed eventually by land on the horizon. As they neared that land, they noticed a crowd was waiting on the shore, cheering. The ladies on the boat were absolutely stunned and horrified. They just had absolutely no idea what was going on. Some of them had been out for a month and they were terrified and hadn't seen their family. And frankly, the thought of, cameras in a crowd both mystified them and horrified them. When they got to the shore, however, they learned that they had been put there by themselves on a sort of conquer your fears reality show where your memory would be erased of, putting yourself there, and you'd have to figure it out and conquer your fears, get over your fear of water in this case. So did they? Did they get over their fear of water, with this weird little experiment? They did, except now they had a new fear. The monster who they were before, who would put them through something like this. That sounds like as good of a start to the weekend as any. Thanks, you all. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We'll see you on Monday. Bye.